When it comes to art school, I've heard some pretty crazy things. For example, a friend of mine told me that her art teacher told her to break up with her boyfriend because she was too happy and she would not be able to make good art. And that, oddly enough, seems to be a common thing in art. Not just the idea that art school sucks, but the idea that depression and art go hand in hand. And my point of view is that, well, I can't exactly argue every artist is normally adjusted. Like, I don't think there's a normal person out there saying, I'm going to sit all day alone and draw pictures. That is the normal thing to do. Because it's true. A lot of artists struggle financially or struggle with mental health, and a lot of that gets integrated into the kind of work they make. But the idea that depression should be a driving force in your art is a dangerous idea to me. Part of the blame comes to how we romanticize stories about artists. Throughout history, painters have worked for merchants, nobility, and the church, all groups of people who were very wealthy and whose wealth today is roughly equivalent to that of the furry community. But the trope of starving artists exists for a reason. Most painters were by no means rich, and the story of someone struggling to be an artist is naturally going to be more relatable than that of a person who immediately succeeded. But is the work of the depressed artist actually more meaningful than that of the happy one? I think to answer this question, we need to answer a very long and complicated question. What is art? Art is communication. There, we did it. Every artist is going to have a different answer for what art is, but to me, I would sum it up with the word communication. It's using any kind of medium, no matter the amount of skill or technical knowledge, to try and express something. Some kinds of art are high communication, like the most popular paintings, films, and literature are probably going to be very clear with what they are trying to say. But other kinds of art are very abstract, as if bordering on the line of, is this even trying to say anything at all? And when this kind of art is successful, it is hugely successful. Because the interpretation of art that is low communication can be so broad that people can find a lot more personal meaning to it. So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with a blank canvas that has a black dot on it, because to push the boundaries of art is part of being an artist. Just doesn't mean you're going to be a successful artist. So in trying to communicate something with art, whether that is very clear or very subtle, what we are trying to communicate plays a big role. If I asked you right now, hey viewer, what kind of art do you want to make? You would probably say, I don't know, whatever I feel like. But in practice, using art to communicate whatever you feel like can actually be very difficult, because it is the equivalent of stripping down naked. You're opening yourself up to a lot of vulnerability and weakness, as people can openly judge your very personal parts. So instead, as an artist, it's a lot easier to play dress up. Instead, you can imagine, well, what if I did this kind of art instead? Maybe then people would think I'm a really cool guy. And we can become obsessed with things like finding the right art style, because finding that right group of people to appeal to is also to hide yourself within that group of people. Even for successful artists, this can lead to a lot of frustration. For every painter in history who did make it as a success, how many of them were also horribly stressed and worried that their work would not appeal to the people who had money and power? And in the end, if it really is all about making money and your own survival, then why not just be a furry? My point of view on all of this is that the thing that I find the most valuable in art is honesty. I think that when we see depression portrayed in art, that can be hugely appealing, because that is a form of laying out absolute honesty in your work. It's someone openly portraying their own weaknesses, fears, and then as vulnerable people ourselves, how is that not oddly appealing and admirable? And at the core, what we want from art is honesty. We want to see what people really are like and who they are, and oddly enough, that is a weirdly difficult thing to achieve. And saying something like personal honesty can sound very heavy. It can make it sound like every single thing you make should be very emotional or very deep. But really, it can be very simple stuff. How you feel kinda tired right now, or how you thought something looked pretty, so you painted it. Odds are, if you really feel like drawing a piece of poop right now, you could do that and post it, and people would love it, because sometimes your personal honesty is a piece of poop. And this goal of achieving honesty in your art is where romanticizing depression can make it a downward spiral. It is very admirable to pursue absolute honesty in your work, but it can be very dangerous to think that your suffering is your only source of personal honesty. To think that this is the only way that you can express yourself openly and honestly. Maybe to the point where you feel like you need to keep suffering to keep your success. To essentially fall in love with your own depression. The point I want to make with this video is not that depressing art is actually worse, or a thing that is wrong to make. I think there's a lot of value in artists using art as a tool to talk about their depression. The value for me that depression as an art lies in its open communication, and for you as a person, there is so much more to you than just the depression. I think judging from past video titles I have made, people wouldn't be too surprised to hear I've suffered from depression and anxiety. So then again, maybe I am just a bit biased, because my depression did not make me want to make great works of art, it made me want to kill myself. And when you are depressed, the idea of not being depressed can be horrifying, because you might become a person who is dishonest. Someone who is just forcing themselves to feel good and be something they are not. Because when you are depressed, everything that is not depressing doesn't feel real. Like you hear a happy song on the radio and all you can think is, oh come on, who are these people trying to fool, huh? We all know happiness doesn't exist. But having come out of my depression, I can say that I still have a lot of things to say, and I don't feel dishonest. And instead of becoming someone different, someone I didn't recognize, I became the person I was before I was depressed.